What happens when science meets art and a global crisis sparks a creative calling? Welcome to this episode of I Love Your Stories. I'm your host, Hava Gurevich, and today I'm joined by the talented photographer and New York City native Carol Schiraldi, who moved to Texas in the early 90s to build a successful career in technology. In this conversation, we explore her journey from software engineer to full time artist, the rich intersection of art and innovation, the role of AI in helping us understand our own humanity, and the moment it all clicked, literally. Welcome to the show, Carol. Now, quick word from our sponsor, and then we'll get right back to the show. When I started selling my art, I had absolutely no idea how to actually turn it into a business, a professional business. And then I came across art storefronts, and that was a game changer. I've been a customer now for years, and they've been instrumental every step of the way of helping me succeed. I have a gorgeous, powerful commerce website. I have marketing tools and a membership to a community that is very supportive and teaches me how to succeed as an artist. Check them out, artstorefronts.com, and tell them Hala sent you. All right. Welcome to this episode of I Love Your Stories. I have a very special guest with me today, Carol Schiraldi. Welcome to the show. And I really appreciate that you are willing to come and share your wisdom and experience. And we've had several conversations, never exactly one on one, but in a group setting. And I'm always struck at your ability to sort of like look at the whole thing from above. First of all, you have this amazing ability to just sort of condense um, a meandering topic into like the main points and also just offer this like really fresh perspective. And so as two artists who I'm pretty certain have very different backgrounds. We're going to get into your background in a minute, and that's going to become very clear. But at the same time, I think there's also a lot of similarities in how we approach our art and how we approach just life, and that's what I'm excited to talk to you about. So, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And I want to start out by congratulating you on the podcast. I think it's going great. I know I've been enjoying the episodes thus far, and I'm really honored to be your next guest. And I wish you all continued success with it. I think it's great to just have artists talk
Mhm.
in conversation because the art community contributes so much to society. And a lot of times the art world is just shut off from people. They don't have access, they can't talk to artists on a daily basis. So this brings a little bit of our world, I think, to the
Yeah.
to the folks. So
And so when I was starting the series and I was talking to people who have done podcasts, I was asking for advice on the podcasts. One piece of advice that really stuck with me is you want it to feel like somebody is eavesdropping on a private conversation. Oh,
okay.
and I really love that idea because what's really most interesting is when we get down to the granular specifics of somebody's experience. And it always seems that when you get really specific and really personal, it resonates most with others because that's the shared experience. So let's start with if you can tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you have you've had a career in tech. I'd love to hear about that. And also you're a photographer, so maybe you can talk a little bit about how long you've been doing it. The floor is yours.
Sure. Oh, sure. Well, I have to start out by saying I'm a native New Yorker now living in Texas. So, the kind of interesting turn of events, and it's really tied both to the tech industry and the photography.
Mm.
I was born in New York City, so I have an interesting background. Like my dad spoke 11 languages and was an attorney and an accountant, and my mom used to ballroom dance on roller skates. So I have this sort of left brain, right brain thing going on my brain. I do have an analytical side, but it also there's a I can't dance very well, but there is a ballroom dancer in me in there somewhere, right? So, um And then when I was growing up, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was in the major of the month club, and I liked all subjects in school, but I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, and I still haven't. I still refuse to grow up, and I don't know what I wanna do when I grow up. I hate to say that because now I'm old, and it's like, well, you should have figured this out by now, but nope.
Mhm.
So I was looking at school and trying to figure out, okay, like, because after high school, you gotta pick college, and it's like, okay, do I wanna go to journalism school? Do I wanna do this? Do I wanna do that? And somehow I got the idea that I wanted to go to engineering school. I went to engineering school, and for a while, I was a physics major. I actually have a minor in physics. I like science, and I like general subjects, like, I like science, I like to read a lot, I like certain things, right? So I gravitated towards certain subjects, and then when I was in school, I realized all the computer programming majors were getting jobs.
Yeah.
I'll go into the computer field. So I started in computers and I liked it enough. It was always a good job. The computer industry in New York City has always been sort of nebulous. So I decided I was going to move to Texas where Austin was really picking up. Again, it was really the ground floor of the tech industry here. So, on a whim, I sort of picked out a job. I applied for a job and got it, and I moved down across the country, away from my family. I didn't really know anybody in Austin, and just picked up and moved for a job. And when I got down here, I decided I wanted a hobby to get and to know my community more because I didn't know. My father's, my mother's family all lived in New York City, so I would get the whole history of New York and everything. When I came to Texas, I didn't know, like, I knew, like, the Alamo, but that's it, like, that's all I had of Texas. So I thought, I want an excuse to, like, go explore my new community, so I met some folks who were doing photography, and I thought, "Oh, that's I'll pick up a camera." And once I picked up a camera, that was the end of it. It was like, I felt like that was sometimes, like, Joe McNally, the famous photographer, talks about this, he says, "The moment it clicks,"
Yes.
right? My life just restarted.
No, I used to be a photographer as well, as a major, and I got my camera, like, in, secondhand store, and from the very first roll of film, like, I've already been an art major by that point, not knowing where my vision fits, and with the first roll of film, it just clicked. So when you said that, like, I'm so glad you mentioned that because it doesn't have to be, like, a passion that you've had your whole life, like from when you were a kid. It's just at any point, like, and who you are and the art that you do and the way that you think. And I'm going to get more into that because you sort of talked in generalities about computers. So I want to hear a little bit more about the actual work that you did, but I feel like the skills that you acquired both in college and then in the real world, like career wise, inform your art. And
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, I had 2 careers for a very long time too. Like, I worked as a programmer for a very, very, very long time. And then I moved to Austin in '92. So from the moment I moved here in August, actually, it's my anniversary of moving, so it feels weird, but and my first show, I think, I took a class because I didn't know how to work my camera, and then my first show was, I think, November of the year I moved, and then I was in my first, national juried show in early of the following year, so, like, January, February. So, not only did I feel like the camera was what I was supposed to be doing, but I felt like as a photographer, I had a lot of success, like, early on, artistic kind of success, like, my work was getting into shows and, I didn't struggle as a photographer, really. It just everything just felt really natural, like, it really this was what I was supposed to be doing. And I have some friends who are in the Major of the Month club, and they tell me all the time, they're like, "I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing." And I always say, "I feel super lucky because I knew what I was supposed to be doing. I found what I'm supposed to be doing. I just have to figure out how to make it work."
yeah,
But I always feel very grateful that I'm not one of the people that doesn't know that still hasn't figured it out yet, right? I just have to figure out, like, how I can make this work and how I can redefine me in the photography spectrum because it's a big umbrella of photography and art in general. So where do I fit in?
yeah,
But I feel like there's a place for me at the table, and this is what, this is like, people talk about finding a purpose in life, and I feel like I feel like I kinda did that. I just haven't figured out how to make it work, and that's, like, a lot easier problem. It's a lot easier hill to climb than not knowing, like, should I be a surfer or should I be a scientist or should I be an astronaut, you know? It's
Um, I wanna pick up on all of those things because you've, like, hit on all the major sort of issues that come up for artists. But let me just go back. So your career was in tech, you did programming. Um, were you, like, in a manager position?
yeah, I never wanted to be a manager, but I was what they'd call a tech lead. So at one point I was an architect for computers, so I would design things.
Mm.
I would design programs, I would design systems of interconnected programs. So I would say like, "Oh, this team has a program code over here and our code's gonna fit in this way."
The reason I asked was because I feel like every time I talk to you, I have a sense that you're really good at seeing the full picture and understanding how different things need to connect.
Sure,
And,
sure. Yeah,
um,
yeah.
that's a really I mean, that's a skill and that's a talent. And I think,
Thank you.
it's something that you can't teach someone to be good at it. You can teach someone to, like, do it, but to, like, really be good at it, you have to have that kind of brain in the first place to be able to see those pattern, make those connections. I'm curious if those skills and that talent, how they, show up in your photography, in your art.
Well, I mean, I like to think about this. There is a way they sort of connect. And when I was a programmer, it's very interesting because a lot of times you get a spec when you're a programmer. So you get this spec. We're going to write a program that does this. Maybe it makes widgets, right? Whatever. I won't go too techie and bore you, but let's make widgets, okay? So you're making widget, but what you have to figure out is, do people really want widgets, or what do they really want? Like, I hate to use it, it's the Spice Girls analogy, but there's that song they have, like, you tell me what you want, what you really, really want, right? Because sometimes people, they say they want one thing, but they really want something else,
Mhm.
right? And so the idea from a programmer's standpoint is, because it is hard to implement code and hard to implement technology, you don't wanna give someone something they really don't want. You have to give them what they really want. That you have to solve their problem.
You have to anticipate their problem.
Yes, yes, and they're not always gonna tell you what their problem is. They sort of hint at it, but they don't even know, right? So it's this mystery that you have to solve. And with art, it's the same way. Like, people who buy art, people who appreciate art, like, a lot of people, when they buy art, you think, "Oh, they just buy it because it looks good." But no, they're buying it because they wanna, when people come to their home, they wanna show the world, like, "Oh, I support the local art community," or "I wanna be different," or "I wanna be colorful, I wanna be happy, I wanna be mood," whatever. So, there's this underlying, like, and photography is very much like that. There's the world that we see, but then there's the sort of the underneath, the undercurrent.
Mm,
And a lot of times the best images come when you tap into you really dive into the subject
mhm,
and capture the essence of it, not just, fix up your hair and put on your Instagram palette and the
mhm,
best portraits are compelling.
mhm, mhm. Um, Everything is connected in life. So you don't have like sometimes, and you go through life, especially when you have a career in tech and then you have a career as an artist. And they feel so like on different, like two different parts of the spectrum. But then when you start talking about, like, well, first of all, you're the same person. So there's that connection. You're using the same brain. That's another connection. And some of the same thought patterns and just your personality and what you're good at, what's interesting to you comes through. So you were talking about with these widgets and this idea of um, figuring out what somebody really, really wants. Especially in the tech world, and I think it's still going on right now. Like you could say, like the most successful apps are the ones that anticipate
Yeah.
somebody wants, and like, oh, I didn't even know I wanted this until I see that it's possible. That kind of thing. So, um, that's what's successful in the tech world. Absolutely. You're not just creating something that does something better. You want innovation. You wanna do it in a whole new way, complete game changer. That's how you get to the top. That's why people like IBM want you, because you can think that way. Um, art in art, it's a very similar thing in a way that, but first, it's also just like, so art is a form of self-expression,
Yes.
and when you pick up a camera and it just clicks, what's really actually happening on the inside, on that level, is that there's always been, a part of you that's been wanting to be expressive, and maybe it has been expressing itself through science, through tech, through innovative widgets, through community interactions, all that. But suddenly it's like a faucet, like there's a whole suddenly, like, or like a road that's been closed this whole time suddenly opens up and you're like, "Whoa, this is amazing." Like, this is just like straight from what I want to say. I have the tools to express it directly. And so in that way, it's like you're finding your voice that you may have not even known that you were looking for.
Yeah,
And that
absolutely. I
right?
totally agree. Yeah.
And, that's why, like, and it resonates so much with me because I was in art school in college, but I had so much to say. I knew I wanted to express it artistically, but I just couldn't find my medium for a very long time. I couldn't find my medium. And so when I came across photography and it clicked, it was because it was just like a direct transmission.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
Um, this is something another photographer that I admired, when I was in college said to me about photography, and it really stuck with me all these years, and I'm wondering if, like, you feel the same way or if you can add to it, is that it's you're looking at a three-dimensional reality, and you're translating it into a two-dimensional image that captures the essence of what you're seeing. And a lot of times, especially the more you do it, you don't you like you get a glimpse of something that you see. And it it's too quick for you to say like, "Oh, this isn't like," but you capture it with, in the photograph, and then when you look at the photograph, you realize like, "Yes, that's what I saw." That's
Yeah. A lot of that happens with, especially like now I'm doing some motion photography, or I do long exposure photography at night. So you get things moving and you get a sense of, I did a whole series of work shot while driving. And that's another one of that where you get when you're driving, you get a sense of the world moving past you,
Mhm.
but you don't see an instant of it. You don't get one frame of it. So photography is in essence like it's telling a story in one frame.
Yeah.
So you only have one frame to say it. It's not like a movie where you can build characters over time. You get, that's it. It's one piece. And then, like you said, the composition is immediate, right? Because in a way, a lot of people say, oh, photography, you just push a button. But what that means is the composition just comes right out. There's not a lot of technique that hinders your composition. So it's really a way to create and play with compositions, instantly. It's like instant gratification in terms of composition.
Yeah,
um,
and that composition, like, finding it, if you kind of abstract it, what you've found is a pattern.
mhm. And then also a lot of photography, and this is gonna sound weird too, but a lot of photography is not so much what you see, but it's what you choose to leave out,
Yes,
right?
yes, um, gosh, like, talking to a photographer, all of the stuff that I was thinking when I was doing photography is coming back to me. So this is another thing that I've heard is that, when you're like in painting or drawing is an additive process. You start out with a blank canvas and you putting marks on it. photography is more of like a subtractive process because you start out with the whole world and you
Birth out.
extract from that just the thing that you want. And
Yeah.
it's still mark making on some level, especially like in the old days when we had silver gelatin film. You are making marks. You're photographing. You're drawing with light, which
That's true. It's very true.
yeah, yeah. Um, so you left your career in tech. How long ago?
I guess it's like 2 years ago,
Years
but I
ago.
had a long career in tech.
Mm,
One of the things too is I'm always been a lifelong learner.
yes.
And I got to the point in tech where I was in a situation where I wasn't learning a lot. I wasn't like it wasn't refreshing. My learning wasn't I wasn't growing. I wasn't learning new stuff. I was really just doing the same role over and over again. And yeah, there's a lot of the new AI stuff. And so that was kind of interesting for me to learn. But it wasn't really enough of it's not enough of a draw you know, um, to really pull me in, and so I was just talking this week because I juried a bunch of work for other artists, and one of the things, when you jury work, a lot of people come and say, "Why did you pick that work?" And I talk about, how I pick work and how I do projects and what a cohesive body of work is and all of this. And one of the things I came up with was I said to one artist, I said, with a camera especially, one of the ways you can make a body of work is you can ask a question for which you don't know the answer to. And you can use your camera as an excuse to go out and learn something about the world. And when you do that, you get a very personal body of work. Even if the photos look like they don't match or whatever, because you have the question, the learning is part of the process, the discovery is part of the process. And I think that's in part why I wanted to do more photography more full time, because it does have that discovery, whether you travel and take photos or even if you stay in your studio, it's the idea that you can ask a question for which you don't know the answer and discover and explore with your camera.
Was it scary, like, deciding to leave, um, that world behind and focus on this new basically a new career?
It wasn't for me, it wasn't scary, it felt like it ran its natural course.
Mm, okay.
It was kinda weird, like, we had the pandemic, I was working from home a lot, then everybody started to go back in the office, and it just felt like, I was really in an office doing the same thing I've been doing for 35 years or whatever, and it was like, I'm getting older, I want it to do something that I wanna do. I really wanna explore more, I really wanna see the world more, I really wanna I've never done photography full time. It's time for me to flip and maybe go down that path. And so it felt oddly enough, it felt very natural, and it felt like it was organic, like it just felt like it was time.
I feel like I need to do an entire episode on how the pandemic, like,
Oh, it curved us all.
or either curved complete 180 or, like, finally gave us that kick in the ass to go in the direction that we've been sort of like
Boy,
thinking about because the same thing we all had so much time on our hands to just sit around and and have an opportunity to kind of indulge in something that was maybe up until now more of a hobby or more of a like a something that you did occasionally, and suddenly you have all the time in the world, like, whether it's baking bread or I know there was all kinds of trends during the
no, it's
pandemic.
absolutely true.
Yeah. And I think for artists, and I might be generalizing, but I feel like that a lot of artists are introverts to
Yeah.
some degree. I think again, I might be generalizing, but even if we're not all introverts, we certainly, for the most part, unless you're working with a crew and your art involves, a sort of that kind of like group dynamic. But most of us work alone and spend a lot of time alone, and by necessity, we feel comfortable spending a lot of time alone. And in fact, having nothing else to do but spend our time alone making art. I think that's a theme for a lot of us, this kind of like, aha, how can I make this happen even after the pandemic?
We got to know ourselves because we were home alone and, and that really and we got to think about what's really important, like you said, it was a kick in the ass. It got us to
Yeah.
self-believe. What is really important? What do I really want? Because what happens is when you work, you get in this habit and pattern of just, I go to work, I come home, I get the mail, I do this, I do that, and you run your life and you never stop and think about, why am I really doing this? What is this for? What is the end game?
Yeah.
um is this what is it really all about? And when you have time to step back and really do that navel gazing and think, what am I doing here? It hits you that you say, well, wait a minute, I've never, and I reached a point where I was like, well, if I don't do photography soon, when am I going to do it? Tomorrow's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
So, I thought, well, that would be a good, it's a good time to, now is as good time as any,
Mhm. What inspires you? How do you stay inspired? Um, and how do you tap into creativity?
For me, I've never had a problem with inspiration. Like, that sounds really weird, but for me, I get all these ideas for projects and I can never implement them. Like, that's my problem. I have too many ideas and not enough, like, you know, time in the day.
Freedom.
So, and if I do have a roadblock or I have a writer's block or a block of some kind, I take it as a gift
Mm,
because I feel like my brain's always thinking like 900 miles an hour, and it's like it's a chance to slow down and think about, okay, what do I really want to do?
mm,
But for me, I mean, ideas come from, I get other artists, I just get asked questions, I read a lot. I go, nature is a big inspiration, music is a big inspiration. I think part of me, because I grew up in New York with such that background, that I've found inspiration in a lot of different places.
mm.
New York is like, we had the food, we had the theater, we had I remember I used to go to theater when I was a kid a lot. The museums. So there's a lot of there that just inspired me in a lot of way. And when you're young and you hang out in a museum, like, you don't think about it. You just think, oh, that was just the museum. But now that I'm older, I think that left some sort of a mark on, it forged me as an artist in an odd way. So,
I
you
think,
know,
I lived in Manhattan for 5 years and then, on Long Island for another 3, 4 years, 5. I spent a lot of time in the area
Hi
and
there.
long enough to get to that point where the fact that there's museums everywhere and art galleries was a given. Like, I had a membership to museums, and I lived on the Upper East Side, and on a hot day, sometimes I would, go to, oh gosh, the Met. I would go to the Metropolitan Museum just up the street. I'd go into, like, the Egyptian,
Oh yeah, yeah.
because it was so cool and air conditioned and quiet in there. I used to go in there just to, like, get away from the heat and the noise, and I wasn't the only one. There were quite a few years who did that. And then I know there's been times when I, like, popped into the Guggenheim just to use the bathroom, and then I was like, "Well, as long as I'm here, what's here?" Like, "Oh, there's a Picasso exhibition, okay." But no, you take it for granted when you live there, and you don't realize until you move to another part of the country where, where I live now, it's a pretty sophisticated town, the University of Michigan, a lot of intelligent people here, a lot of, like, tech businesses here, Google's here, there's, um, the university, the hospital, there's a lot. But as far as culture, it's a little bit of a desert. There's very little, and yes, there's a few things in Detroit and a few more if you go to Chicago, but that's a day trip. That's not like I'm gonna run in because I need to get away from it. That's a planned thing, and that's something you do if you already have, like, if it's something that you were doing as a kid, or if there's like, if you're already interested in art. One of the things that I came across in Manhattan that is that everybody just goes to galleries, like gallery openings. People just show up at museums and, not just tourists that are there for, but it's part of the fabric of life. So when you grow up with it, you kind of like you absorb that culture, that part that art is everywhere and art is part of culture. And I think that that's so fortunate that you have that. Um, and it's just really unfortunate that it's not more widely recognized. Um, yeah.
I was talking with another artist recently about this as well, but one of the subjects that came up was that a lot of kids today, they don't teach them how to draw in school, they don't teach them music.
Yeah.
Our education system is really, like, failing them in
Mhm.
a lot of ways. But what happens is people now think that if you can draw, if you can play an instrument, it's some kind of black magic, or you have some kind of gift, but they don't realize, like my father in his time, he learned how to draw in school, even though he was an accountant and a lawyer. They all had to learn how to draw. And I remember when I was doing art, as an adult, even as an artist, he would say to me, "Oh, it's all just shapes, don't you know?" And I'd be like, "How do you know this?" And he knows how to draw because it's like, "Well, I had to learn in school. Didn't you learn in school?" Or like, "No, they didn't." I had to learn as an adult. And I'm lucky that I came from that environment where, I spoke a foreign language, I played a musical instrument, I took art, I went to museums as a kid. I had a rounded education, and, I think that's really important. A lot of people harp on the STEM, 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 like you have to do math, otherwise it's not a real subject. And creativity and imagination is really underrated in society. I mean, I'll get off my soapbox, but
It's a good soapbox. Um, Let me shift gears, and I'm gonna ask you, what are you most passionate about right now?
So right now, I've been thinking I want to do an interesting project. I want to start a new project. I want to do something new. And I've been thinking again, I started that questioning of, ask a question that you don't know an answer to. And with all the AI stuff, I'm starting to think I may do a project around not using AI, but around AI, talking about AI's role in with humanity and all of this. And so I have again, I always have a series of projects. I was reading something recently about Point Nemo. I don't know if you heard my I put it on Facebook and everybody like attacked me. So now they all think I'm going to do a Point Nemo project. It's kind of
Don't know
funny, but
what that is. Enlighten.
I didn't know either, and that's what's really interesting about it. Okay, so there's a place, I guess it's a place called Point Nemo, and what it is it's the farthest place from anywhere else on Earth. It's like in the middle of nowhere. And they put this buoy to mark Point Nemo, and it's sorta like off the coast of South America, but it's not really right off the coast. It's like in the middle of the ocean, and it's like when you're here, there's nothing around you, you're isolated. And this sparked my imagination 'cause I kept thinking, what an interesting concept for so I came up with the idea of the view from Point Nemo. Like,
Mhm.
what would the view not Point Nemo itself, but what would the view look like? But then not just going to Point Nemo, but the idea of if you were isolated, what would that look like? What is the concept of isolation? What does isolation look like? I think
I love the philosophical aspect, the questioning of that, not the actual place, but what it represents. This whether it's the isolation from humanity or just isolation from distractions, isolation from, you can fill in the blanks, whatever it is that you would like to question, what it would feel like to not be surrounded with. That's really, really interesting. Um,
Yeah, that's basically what I wanna do is a project where it's more philosophical and it's not just like because a lot of my work is, I travel and
yeah.
I'm inspired by nature and that's nice work, but I really wanna do something that's, like, more thought-provoking and, like, kinda out there and not maybe not even sellable, but just from an artistic point of view, like
Self-gratifying.
yeah, self-gratifying and just, really just ask a question and do an exploration, just ask those big questions.
I feel like you sort of mentioned that, but I feel like AI, we all can talk about the bad things it's doing. It's doing a lot of bad things. It's probably environmentally even destroying Point Nemo. So, but on a conceptual level, AI. um, offers this unique opportunity to go deep and ask questions and get answers that you didn't even know you wanted, in a
Yes.
way. Um, I'm starting to embrace it more and more myself. And so it gives me hope when I know that creative people are passionate about doing something with AI because we need that balance because there's a lot of like greedy people and
Yeah.
downright like evil people who are, like utilizing AI. And so we need to sort of like bring the balance back with people who are wanting to use it for good and for creativity and for self-expression. So that's encouraging. Um,
Just like the pandemic taught us about ourselves, I think AI can teach us about humanity.
Absolutely. That is so well said. See, that's the thing. Like you're so good. Like I will talk for like 15 minutes about something, blah 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 blah, blah. And then you come in and then one sentence you'll be like, "This is what you mean."
Oh, well, thank
That's
you.
perfect. Um I love that. Um
Thank you.
yeah. So I uh I want to pick up a little bit about this balance because that was something that I'm kind of backtracking. Um,
Sure, sure.
the balance when you have a full-time career and a passion that you're really devoting, let's just say like the equivalent of a full time as an artist, um, how do you find that balance? And was I know the pandemic was instrumental in getting you to finally make that decision, but um, it must have already been on the fence
Oh, yeah.
for you to. Um, I'd love to hear your take on that because I think that that is a challenge. That was something that I found incredibly challenging, and I continue to find it challenging even now where my career is my art and my passion is my art, but they're still not they're sort of at odds with each other. Can you talk
Sure.
about that? Because you
Yeah, sure. It is very hard. I'm a big I read again, it's one of those things. I read a book once called this guy did a book called he talks about it, it's called The Sex and Cash Theory. And it's really interesting. He talks about he says everybody has their sex or something they want to do, they like to do, they enjoy to do. And then everybody has their cash, which is something that they get paid to do. And in a way, the most successful artists are the ones that they can blend their sex and cash, right? And he talks about take an actor, right? When an actor's starting out, maybe they have to wait tables, right? So that's their cash, and their sex is they get to do dinner theater, or art. They do a play or something, right? He said, then if you look at an actor he used John Travolta, at the time he was he's still a popular actor, I guess. But, if his sex and cash are very different, right? Because maybe he has to do a summer blockbuster movie, right? So his sex now is still in the movies. It's still his art, but it's still not something he really wants to do. Maybe he really wants to do like an art house movie and he has to juggle the needs of, well, I have to do a summer blockbuster just so I can stay in the industry and get it, have all the producers like me still, feed the beast, but then I can do this art house project sort of on the side, what I really want to do. And it is a very delicate balance. And I think the artists who are most successful in many ways are the ones who can walk that line and say, well, okay, I have this, thing I like to do versus the thing that pays me or that, can keep me in the industry. And the more you do, I mean, for me, it's interesting because my fields merge. Like when I started, tech was very tech and art was very art. And then photography became really it's AI, it's even, it's
it's
digital processing, right? So everything I did in tech really is coming into play in the photography with the merging. And I always thought it was I watched this happen. I saw, the two desperate fields merging together. And I thought, wow, they're really blending,
Mm.
and it's happening a lot in a lot of other fields. I mean, AI is spurring that on, writing and technology are merging. And there's a lot of hybrid work, fusion. It's like fusion food in a way, things are blending.
Yeah, I love that. So basically, to be happy in that, you have to be a successful hooker.
Everybody's a hooker. Some people's hooking is legal, right? That's all it is really all it is. I hate to be blunt, but I mean, that's it.
So for you, where is that? When do you feel like you are like hitting it out of the park as far as being a hooker? Well, I hope nobody just picks up the episode right from that.
Where were you when your hooking kicked in? Yeah, it's just too funny. Yeah, well, I this year I did a talk at the SPE conference, which is the Society for Photographic Education,
Mhm.
and I actually talked about it was very very kind of an interesting talk. I talked about the history of photography in terms of image manipulation, but also image processing and also technology AI, like how these things all and history even, how they all blend together, right? And I realized like that's why they picked me to give that talk because I have this weird tech background that not a lot of photographers have. But then also because I work in technology as a bigger picture also, and then also just my expertise in photography.
Oh,
And I think if I could do a project like that, that's where I would hit it, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that takes me to my final question. It's
Sure.
gonna be a really good place to end this is what is your personal definition of success? What and I guess you could say like to be a good hooker, but like in general,
So for me,
how do you find success?
I think of success and maybe because I'm a photographer, but I think of success as a tripod, right? It has 3 legs, right? One leg is maybe financial success or just traditional success. And as an artist, traditional success, like does your work sell? Does your work resonate? Do people want to put your work above their couch, right? That's one leg of it. One leg of it is artistic success. Are you doing artistic projects that fulfill you, that nourish your soul, that make you, to put you in the realm, as a photographer or an artist, are you working in the field with other artists and are you bringing something to the table? And a lot of times that doesn't bring about monetary success, but it's very fulfilling, right? That's the sex part of the sex and cash equation, right? And then the third one is really centered around the community, right? Are you bringing something to the community? Are you saving the whales? Are you teaching people? Are you doing something to better the world? Because even if you have your sex and cash, if you just keep it to yourself, it's kind of worthless, right? So I mean, hate to use the analogy, but if you're that hooker, you got to take it to the streets, right?
I love this analogy. It keeps getting better and better. So I feel like I'm seeing like this like Venn diagram. So there's like financial gratification, um, self-expression gratification, and social contribution.
Yeah,
And the place where they all meet, that's your life's purpose.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I
I
love
see
that.
that. I mean, that's my view, but maybe does
That
that make sense?
that's fantastic. That's fantastic and a wonderful place to end this conversation, even though we could keep going for like another hour or two. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Continued success to your podcast.
I thank you so much. Thanks again for tuning in. That's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please help us out by leaving a review, a comment, subscribing, sharing it with your friends. Every little bit helps, and I really appreciate it. And before we go, I want to give a huge shout out to our sponsor and producer, Art Storefronts. If you've been thinking about turning your art into a real business or just want to level up your online presence, now is honestly the best time, especially with the holiday selling season coming up in Q4. I can't stress this enough. Art Storefronts isn't just a website builder. They're a full-blown partner for your art business. They give you the tools, education, and marketing support to actually make sales, not just sit online and hope. And if you're unsure whether your art will sell, no worries. Just head to artstorefronts.com and sign up for a demo. They'll give you a free art review and a marketing assessment of your art to show you exactly what's possible. So go to artstorefronts.com, tell them Hava sent you, and I'll catch you on the next episode.